This is 2019's Lifechanger. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up to Emily waking up in bed. We see that she's lying in bed with a body that looks like it's been sucked dry. She slowly gets out of the bed, and she looks at herself in the mirror. She notices a wound in the side of her abdomen, and we see a knife that was used to make the wound. This movie straight up starts at 100. First off, waking up like that would be enough to make my day a complete disaster, but she keeps going by cutting up the body in the bathtub. According to the narrator, this is just a means for survival, and she takes the body parts out to a field to burn. After burning them, she throws the remains into a wheelbarrow and dumps the parts into a secret compartment in a nearby barn. Afterwards, Emily heads to a diner where she orders breakfast and seems to be practicing her new identity. After practicing, she heads back home and inspects every bit of the house. She finds something to smoke, and she pops a squat on the couch to smoke it. Soon, James comes home, and he can smell Emily smoking. He turns off the music and asks her where she's been. He mentions that he's had the police looking for her, and he goes to call the police to tell them that he's found her. The entire time, some dude is narrating. He's talking us through everything as though he's a shapeshifter that's been doing this for years. Emily tries to calm James down, but he points out that she's been gone for 3 days. She tries to warn him to stop, but when he doesn't listen to her, she stabs him with a wine corkscrew. And that's another body wrapped in black trash bags and another bloodstain to clean up. She's just about had it with this process. What about when the police show up looking for another missing person? Emily goes on her routine of brushing her teeth, and she notices her skin starting to rot. The narrator tells us that one body used to last for years, but now she only gets about 6 hours. Soon a knock comes from the door, and it turns out to be Detective Ransone. Ransone is there to check in on James, and Emily invites him in. Ransone wastes no time, and he asks Emily where she was all that time she's been missing. Emily grabs onto his hand and something seems to take over Ransone. The after effect of the body actually looks realistic and disturbing. Now Emily has become Ransone. Ransone goes over his new identity, and he checks his gun for ammo. Afterwards, Ransone heads downstairs to pack some essentials for getting rid of the old Ransone's body. I feel like he loses a lot of time that he has in his new body by covering up the evidence of the previous body. That's precious time. Well, this time he just sets the house on fire and he just books it out of there. Efficient. And he's a detective, so who are they going to call to the case? Probably himself. That night, the station tries to contact Ransone, but he shuts off the radio. Ransone explains that antibiotics make the body last longer, but making the body rot helps him change bodies faster. Ransone finds a druggie that he knows on the street, and he searches him for coke. After seizing it for himself, he finds a quiet part of town and snorts a few lines before heading into the tavern. As Ransone looks around the bar, he spots Julia, and he heads next to her to order her a drink. After working his magic on her, she starts to loosen up, and he tries to get on her good side. The narrator claims that she's the only one that matters, and his mind always goes back to her. Is this a love story? I thought this was a thriller or horror movie. Why do these movies false advertise like that? Well, hopefully it's actually a good love story. After a little more talking, the two of them get really up close and personal outside until Ransone starts to feel his body failing him. He tells Julia to run, and after she's left, he hobbles the other way. It turns out that the injury from his Emily body actually followed him over to Ransone. That's not supposed to happen. Ransone can hear people nearby, and he uses his badge to essentially carjack a man. The man tries to convince Ransone to let him go, but Ransone explains that he has to do this or he'll die. So the man is gonna have to die for him. There's a struggle, but you can probably guess how this ends. Ransone is now Sam, and he's trying to get rid of the previous body. He messes up this time though. He gets a call from Sam's wife, and he dips. Sam heads home and he finds Rachel waiting for him on the couch. After seeing him, she storms off to the bedroom where Sam slowly follows. Once in the bedroom, Sam puts his wedding ring back on before heading into bed, and he quietly turns off the light. When morning comes, Sam's daughter tries to wake him up, but he curses at her to get her out. When he comes out to the dining room, his old wound starts acting up, and he heads to the office. Of course, he's a dentist. This is a huge fear of mine, not shapeshifters, dentists. Luckily for this random kid, the shapeshifter still keeps all of the victim's memories, so technically, he has been to dental school. When Sam goes to a diner for lunch, he spots Julia, and he hurries into a taxi. He tries to get the taxi driver to follow Julia home, but she thinks that's super suspicious and refuses to go anywhere with him. Defeated, Sam heads to the movie theater. This body's lasting forward. He's gonna hit 24 hours pretty soon. That night at dinner, Sam starts to lose it, and he heads right back to the bar. According to the narrator, he only has one tangible thing from his real family, a little marble that he carries with him. Soon, Julia joins him at the bar and she tells him her story. She tells him that he should appreciate his family, and she wishes that she could have had more time with her husband and child. It turns out that her son died a few years ago prior at 3 years old, and she tells him that her husband Richard vanished one night. After hearing how Julia feels about everything, he offers to buy her a drink, and he tells her that he's afraid. When she asks if he considers himself a good person, he answers it with another question. Does it even matter? Wow, this movie's throwing us into Philosophy 101. I was not expecting to contemplate the existence of good versus evil payouts. Well, Julia throws another conundrum at him. She thinks that the only thing that matters is just not being the bad thing. After some time, Sam decides that it's time to go, and he heads to an inn to snort some coke. He ends up passing out, but when he comes to, the rod has started to grow even faster. He decides to call his assistant Rachel, and he tells her that he needs a friend. He hesitates for a moment after hearing that she has a boyfriend, but he gives her the address anyways. After some time, Rachel shows up, and she tells him that she's not really comfortable with this. She was right in telling him about how she felt before going in the room, but when she noticed that the room was super dark, she should have just turned right around. Now she's lying on the bed sucked dry. Poor Rachel. I actually kinda liked her. By morning, Rachel has disposed of the body, but the neighbor Colleen shows up at the barn, thinking that she's Frank. When Rachel tries to leave, Colleen spots her, and Rachel heads straight for the office to get some antibiotics. Afterwards, she heads home, and she finds that her boyfriend Tommy isn't home. She immediately takes a handful of antibiotics, and that night she heads to the bar. Little does she know that Tommy is following her. Rachel heads inside and she takes a seat right next to Julia. The two of them talk up a storm and Julia and her book that she's working on. But Rachel messes up when she starts talking about what the bar was like in the 70s. She plays it off as just being an old soul, and somehow that works for Julia. After noticing that Rachel has sad eyes, she hands her her card, and Rachel sees that she's a counselor. Then John pops up with his 10-mile smile and ruins the moment. John asks to buy Rachel a drink and Julia dips. Well, you can't just tell someone that they have sad eyes and then leave them to fend off the Johns of the world. That's just unprofessional. John talks up a storm, and Rachel watches as Julia connects with Robert at a nearby table. Suddenly, she spots the news on the TV, and she sees that the police have discovered the barn full of bodies. Well, Rachel rushes to the bathroom to snort some coke, and she takes John away from the barn to change bodies. And they head back to Rachel's apartment, snort some coke, and get ready for the process. Rachel actually tries to slow things down, but John starts to force himself on her. In a fit of rage, Rachel tosses him off of her and runs to the kitchen to get a knife. A struggle ensues and Rachel ends up winning. A wounded John stumbles down the stairs, but Rachel stabs him in the back over and over. So much for having a new body. I understand her predicament, but John had that coming. Call in Tommy. Rachel heads back upstairs to change her outfit and pack, and she can hear one of her downstairs neighbors telling others to call the police. Just as Rachel gets downstairs, the police arrive and she makes her way around the building. When she starts running, the police go to follow her, but she ends up hiding in an open garage. She grabs a nearby blanket and decides to crash there for the night. In the morning, she notices that the rod is starting to take hold. And here comes Tommy, yet another person that Rachel decides isn't the best idea to take the form of. How did his stalker butt end up finding her in that random garage, though? She gives Tommy the slip, and she starts to have the pain in her abdomen again. After seemingly coming to terms with the fact that she's running out of time, she decides to go tell Julia the truth about what she is. When she arrives at Julia's office, she sees Julia leaving with Robert, and it's clear that they're romantically involved. A selfish mind would just say tell Julia the truth anyways. Rachel's ridiculously selfish mind says to take Robert's body. Now that's messed up. To take the form of Julia's new boyfriend just to tell her that she's the old husband that's dying? Julia just ends up with no one in the end. After taking Robert's body, he calls Julia to try and establish the fact that he wants to see her again, and Julia agrees. That night, Robert heads over to Julia's apartment, and he's immediately taken away by Julia's personality and memories. The two of them share a glass of wine, and Robert talks about the connection that the two of them share. Why is he trying to connect with her on yet another level? You're running out of time, dude. Stop trying to make love with her one last time and get the words out. Now it's really messed up. When Julia gets on top, she notices Robert's wound, but he plays it off like he walked into a nail. Time to traumatize her with some lovemaking with the husband that she really thought left, but really just stole her new boyfriend's body before he dies. Julia thought she needed therapy before. That was just the beginning. The next morning, Julia wakes up to Robert making her breakfast, and he takes the day to go on an extended date with her. When Robert gets back to his own place, he's decided that it's time to deal with the dead body, and he disposes of the parts under a nearby bridge. Somehow Robert's taken enough antibiotics to last a few days at least. The science of a dying shapeshifter isn't sound, but this can't end well. One day, Robert finds Julia watching a news report on the barn full of dead bodies, and he tries to pull her back to the present. He promises that nothing bad will happen to her, but she doesn't seem so sure. One night, the two of them are getting ready for a date, but Robert starts to notice the rot coming over him. He starts vomiting blood in the toilet, But when he comes out, he gets a little jumpy about Julia touching him. Imagine if he accidentally stole her body at this point. Now he deems it the proper time to tell her the truth. I feel like we're well past that. Robert tells Julia a story about how he killed his mother at the age of 12, and it was then that he realized what he was. The more of his backstory that he explains to her, the more confused and worried she becomes. When he gets to the part of the story where he talks about how he changes into people, Julia really doesn't know how to cope with this information. Could you imagine your significant other just opening up about killing people and taking their bodies? What if they said that they were actually your long-lost spouse? Julia's handling this about as rationally as possible. He tells her that he actually took her husband's place after they got married, and he just wants to feel that love again. That didn't even cross my mind, honestly. He's already taken her lover's place before now. I thought that they met while he was Richard, but it turns out that he killed Richard while they were already married. Robert tells Julia that Richard is actually back at the farm with the rest of the bodies, and he tries to explain that he doesn't really know who or what he truly was before this. He tries to make it clear that none of this was personal, and it was all about his own survival. Julia is still having a hard time with this information, and she tries to leave. Robert can't let her go, and he tries to reiterate that he loves her. Julia tases Robert and starts punching him, but Robert accidentally grabs her to try and defend himself. That's a happier ending than just letting her know the truth and making her live with it. Julia apologizes to the dried-up original, and she heads to the bar for one last drink. She thanks the bartender for serving her over the many years that she's come in there, and she downs her drink. Julia takes a look in the mirror, and she admits that she's the only one that can stop this. She heads home, lies down, and lets the rot take over. Her body convulses as the metamorphosis takes over, and in the morning, a giant womb pulsates on the bed. A hand pokes out, and the real man pops out. His name is Drew, and he makes his way through the city as a normal man of his proper age. Drew takes Julia's laptop to the park, and he looks to the sky as he comes up with the ending to his own story. Then the credits roll. Okay, that was actually pretty good. Yes, it was a love story in the end, but it was tastefully done. Twists and turns throughout kept you going, but it was the ending that really sold it. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.